Well. Welcome to Scouching Live, your exclusive provider of the brand new Jaromir Jagr bobbleheads. So if you want one, you can go over to scouching.ca and pick one up. Don't ask where I got them, but yeah, we got all of them. So anyway, welcome to Scouching Live. If you're in with the Pittsburgh Penguins or the NHL, you didn't hear that. I am Will, of course. I'm brought to you with I come to you bearing the gift of producer AJ. AJ, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I didn't realize I've been promoted to gift or upgraded to gift.
It's nice to hear from you.
But I guess when you hijack all those bobbleheads, you're in a giving mood.
I didn't do anything. I just said we have them. I didn't say I did anything.
Fair enough.
You know, it finders keepers, right? That's kind of how it is. But anyway, yes, it's always nice to chat, I suppose. So good day.
Just send one to my address. You know what it is.
All right. Yeah, I could. Yeah. I definitely will be leaving one on your doorstep, so you're welcome. It's a collector's item now, But anyway, before we get into the show, we're going to do our ad read. So we're brought to you by Fanatics. You can use our affiliate link code below or scan the QR code in the chat window to provide a small kickback to the show on anything you buy in the store. We're also brought to you by Puck Preps Hockey, where you can get all your NCAA and CHL prospect needs across the entire spectrum of the Canadian Hockey League in the United States. We're also brought to you by Fractal Hockey Consulting, which is my business for hand-track targeted player analysis and recruitment packages for the NCAA Europe and beyond. Of course, we're still partnered with the Golden Bucket Tournament, so if you're interested in potential playing opportunities over in Europe, and you are currently a Division III or a Division I or a U Sports player or a CHL player aging out, you're more than welcome to register. And you can get in touch with me, and we'll get you all set up. There's lots of fun stuff planned there, and teams from all over Europe are coming to take a look at what we've got to offer. And of course, we're brought to you by Scouching.ca, which is my own website that I've built, and you see all the stuff lying around everywhere. Oh man, my watch got caught on my cable. But you can subscribe to Scouching.ca and get exclusive access to innovative data tools with tons of insights into draft prospects and players making their way into the NHL. And more. Plenty of other stuff comes with a subscription. And we're opening. I will also say that we're starting to put up more blog posts on the site just to keep up or help keep up with the guys that I've been tracking over the course of the week. So the first one is now public. So you can check that out on scouching.ca. But you get early access to those blog posts with any level of subscription. So welcome to the show. It's been a pretty crazy couple of days since the last time we spoke, Mr. Producer Man.
Absolutely.
First, we're going to be going through a bit about the Detroit Red Wings. We're going to talk about the Edmonton Oilers and what they've been up to recently, the resurgence of the Buffalo Sabres, and if there's a bandwagon, a little bit of the Predators as well, because they've been absurd. And then, of course, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to answer them, and we'll get to them in the back half of the episode as always. So, producer AJ, man, we're going to start with the Detroit Red Wings because they are quite the story. Just for the record, they are in the middle of a 6-game losing streak. They are now currently out of a playoff spot, and they are just 3 points ahead of Washington and 5 ahead of Buffalo, with, I believe they have 18 games left, 20 games left. You can correct me if I'm wrong. It's like 18 or something. It's not many. Actually, I have the standings in front of me. It's 17 games left. There we go. I could just look over there. But it has not been great. In the last 5 games, they've scored 8 goals. They've been scored on 27 times. And it was really sort of capped off with a brutal loss to the Buffalo Sabres, 7-3 in a game that they went down 6-1. So, AJ, your first from the top down, your prognosis of the Detroit Red Wings, as they are now, and what the heck is going on there?
They're cooked, like the title implies. But just losing Dylan Larkin has been such a massive injury for them to overcome, and clearly they just haven't. And I think it speaks to a lack of like true superstars on that team. Obviously, you have Patrick Kane, but it's not the Patrick Kane of old. He's still doing well, but he's recovered from surgery, like some pretty major surgery, and he's doing okay. Lucas Raymond looks really good, but it's like, where's Alex DeBrincat? He hasn't really done a whole lot since the beginning of the year, like when they really were going off and looking good.
Yep.
And they've just kind of filled the team with solid players, but not really amazing players by any means.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, and I think they also they were riding a heater as well for a long time. And if anything, that heater has gotten even more heated, which is crazy to me considering they have been losing so much. Their goaltending has really dropped off over the last month. They've had the seventh worst save percentage in the league. They have the eighth worst shot differential in the league over the last month. It's been pretty incredible to see this team sort of kind of really fall apart. Something that I guess the data science would say was entirely possible. I remember I spoke to someone who is pretty close with that organization, and even he was kind of like, I don't quite understand where it's coming from, but they find ways to score. So ride it, ride on Cowboy and see how long you can take it. Similar things to what was going on with Vancouver for a long time going on into this season. I mean, I watched some of that Sabres game, and it was kind of sad. Like, it really kind of, to me, my impression was it was kind of like Lucas Raymond against the world. Like, it really just felt like there wasn't really that much going on there. The goaltending wasn't great for either goaltender. Like Ben Sherratt alone was a big reason why a few of those goals, especially early in the game, went in. And he has been having a rough time here. Even Mort Seider, like, he's a guy who has been, I know I was reading about this earlier today, that Derek Lalonde is kind of trying to reprogram him a little bit to be a little bit more defensive. But I mean, when you look at the numbers this year, especially beyond just production, like his defensive impacts are solid, but it's outweighed by or actually, if anything, his defensive impacts are quite poor, playing with Jake Wallman all year relative to the Detroit Red Wings when he's on the ice relative to when he's off. So it's been a weird year for him. It's been a weird year for the Red Wings. Do you think, I'm curious what you would say to this, do you think that they managed to sort this out in the next 17 games and crack their way into a playoff spot from here? Because I honestly don't know about that.
I think it's possible, but kind of unlikely. Like, I like the Islanders better in terms of just their scoring depth, like the guys they have, right? Like, Matt Barzal's been fantastic this year. Bo Horvat's been awesome. Brock Nelson, who I've brought up a couple of times on this show, never gets enough credit for how good he is. Like, they've got some decent scoring. And then an outstanding goaltender, like cream of the crop goalie. Like, probably, you definitely put him in the top 5, like, at the very minimum. But I think there's a case for Ilya Sorokin to be looked at even higher. But, like, Detroit doesn't have that, right? Like, they don't have a superstar player, as I was mentioning earlier. Like, Dylan Larkin and Patrick Kane are kind of like those guys for them. And Alex DeBrincat, too, to an extent. But DeBrincat's streaky, as we mentioned to each other before the show, because I was complaining about his lack of fantasy production for me this week and weeks previous.
Same with me. I have him on a fantasy team, and he's been not good for me. Not great.
So I just think with them, they're a team that is lacking a bit of, like I said, real stars. And when their big guy goes out, and Dylan Larkin, like you even mentioned, like you have a stat about their record without him. I believe they're 11 and 24 or 12 and 24?
That's it. 11 and 24 this year without Dylan Larkin.
Yeah, and that's just, you're not going to be able to get through games like that or chunks of the season like that. Like, let's say Dylan Larkin's out for part of the playoffs, even if they make it. There's no way the Red Wings are even a threat, right? And they've been riding the heck out of Alex Lyon. So he's been tired, and they've just, like, he's collapsing out there. And you have Ben Sherratt, who's not been great. Justin Hall, who's been scratched, and they've signed for a pretty big deal. Like, I think he's making over $3 million for a cup. Like, either, I think it's for 1 more year, but it might be for 2.
I think it's 2 more.
Yeah, and that's a lot for him. And they're not even playing him.
Yeah.
So I just think there's a lot of mediocre on that roster. And when Dylan Larkin's not there to really jolt them with his speed and just his offensive ability, like, they kind of fall apart.
Yeah, I'm just double checking Justin. Yeah, he's signed for 2 more years at $3.4 million. The same contract actually that Jake Wallman has. Technically, they're both signed until the end of 2026.
That's a lot of money to have sitting on your bench.
They got
your bench in your press box.
$3 million Oli Mata until the end of next season. Ben Sherratt at 4.75 until 2026. It's tough. I mean, the Red Wings were a team. I mean, they have been a team where, it's like it's the same thing. It's the same story with a lot of teams that really sort of hit the basement. Like digging your way out of being in the basement is so hard, and I still feel like the Red Wings are kind of close to finding their way to what they think they could be, but they just I think you kind of touched on it, where it's like they just don't have that extra oomph that other teams have, especially in the Eastern Conference, right? Like even the Rangers have like an Artemi Panarin who just goes over the boards and is automatic, right? Or Florida, right? Like Florida has just a bunch of guys who you throw over the boards and you know what you're going to get.
Well, they also
but with
have awesome
Detroit,
complementary guys too, like
yes,
elite level complementary players, and like Carter Verhaeghe, Sam Reinhart has been that this year, right? Like they've got some awesome players to support them with, and now Vladimir Tarasenko too, right? Like they added him, but it's like Florida is filled out, and they play a distinct style that I've mentioned a ton of times, where it's smothering, fast, and physical too. Like it's everything you'd want, even if you're an old person. Like seriously, it is.
Yeah, no, you're right.
It blends the best of both worlds, truthfully, and that's why I think it's so awesome. But with Detroit,
it's a great,
because you and I were talking yesterday about the Yzer plan in Tampa and how they've won a ton of cups, but we talked about how well they were set up in terms of like, you got Nikita Kucherov, you got a first overall pick and a second overall pick, and Steven Stamkos and Victor Hedman. Then you got Braden Point, right? Like they have truly elite superstars. They also had Andrei Vasilevsky, who was the best goalie in the world for a period of time and is still in that conversation, though I wouldn't put him there right now, but he's still an elite goalie. They had all of those pieces to build around. What does Detroit have? Like, when you think about it, what does Detroit have that Tampa had?
Yeah, I mean they don't really have that.
They don't have any of that.
Well, yeah, and I mean I don't know. I don't think you can go back and really fault a ton of, like, a lot of what you're talking about is draft picks.
Yeah.
And I think when you go back and look at who the Red Wings have drafted in general, like when they need to make a high pick, they do pretty well, but you can also but when they don't, they really don't. Like that's the thing about Detroit. Like when I post that, sort of cross section of here's all the teams in the NHL and all the guys they've drafted and all the guys that are sort of whatever are technically a prospect in my criteria, people criticize how low the Red Wings are. And my thing is like, well, they've drafted a billion times and a bunch of their picks just have not worked. And even the ones that they've drafted really high, Marco Kasper is one who's been getting better, but he started the season real slow. Nate Danielson, top 10 pick, is a guy who I would not have picked in the top 10, and he's been having a good season in the WHL, like a good season, but not a, I don't see a game-changing guy there.
Right, but Will, do they have anybody in their current prospect pool right now that you feel like is going to come in, contribute in a meaningful way, and be better than like an Alex DeBrincat or like better than like a Dylan Larkin?
I think it's possible with guys like Edvinsson and Sandin Pellikka, but I wouldn't jump to that conclusion right away. Like they won't. I think Sandin Pellikka could be an exciting player, but I don't really think that you're not gonna be. I don't think any of these guys are gonna move the needle so much that it's like, okay, now they have a foundational player here. Like they have a lot of good players. Like I think that Simon Edmondson's
say
going to be
that their core is pretty much established. Like we have the core basically of the Detroit Red Wings almost fully formed at this point. Maybe minus a Sandin Pellikka and a Simon Edvinsson.
Sebastian Cossa might get there. I mean, Cossa, like, their goaltending, we saw it the last, like, against Buffalo, it was not a good time. They've been having a bad time recently. Ville Husso is still on the raw. Are they juggling 3 goalies right now with Alex Lyon? Or are they?
I
I can't, because
believe
they
so.
ran with Reimer and Lyon the other night, because both of them got into the net. But, you know, like, Sebastian Cossa could be a good NHL goalie. Sure, I can't say it's impossible. He's been good with Grand Rapids this year. But again, like, you never know with goaltenders either, right? And you never know, honestly, with anybody until they've played a lot of games, right? Like, okay, so Ville Husso is dealing with a bit of an injury. Okay, but still. But, like, you know, remember all the craziness about Elmer Soderblom for a while. He's back in the AHL and he's a mid-level AHLer, right? There's a couple of guys that I think could play for the Red Wings down the stretch, but I just don't. They had a season to this point. They have had a season that they were much better than they probably should have been. And now it's kind of regressing a little bit, but not in the way that I expected, right? Like, the numbers said that they were scoring and scoring and scoring when they really shouldn't have been. And now they're doing that more than ever. I looked it up. Like, I did the numbers because I track how much teams outperform their expected percentages. And their offense is outshooting their expected offense by 30%, which is higher than anybody at this point in the season, higher than anyone since the end of November. So they're just right. They're still riding an insane offensive heater that I still just cannot imagine. You know, I can't imagine sustains itself for the rest of the year.
So what you're saying is there's more pain to come, essentially.
Yeah, like, the big hole has been their goaltending, but if their goaltending goes back to sort of league average, then their offense is still just firing. And it's to the point where it's really hard to maintain that. And honestly, watching them, I can't really see how they're scoring all of these goals. Like, I watched the last 5 games or so of them just shooting and getting their offensive chances, and it just seems like something where a lot of the time, unless it's on special teams, they're going to have trouble putting the puck in the net, but they seem to manage to do it. So I don't know. I honestly, the Red Wings are so interesting in a way, because there was, I think, a ton of optimism, and they continuously seem to get reasons to be very optimistic, right? Like, signing Patrick Kane this year was a big land, and he's been pretty good, right? Like,
yeah.
we were talking earlier in the season about how little we expected out of him. I would say he's surpassed my expectations for sure.
Yeah, he's arguably been their best player without Dylan Larkin. You could put Lucas Raymond in that conversation, and he probably takes the cake, but it's like there's a conversation to be had. And we're talking about a Patrick Kane who was drafted first overall, 2007?
2007, yeah. I was in high school.
Yeah. So that guy.
Yeah, and I mean, I've loved Lucas Raymond recently. I think Lucas Raymond has been playing great. I think I like Lucas Raymond is a guy who I've always really admired, just the way that he plays, and I'm glad that that's still there. I've been watching the Red Wings the last couple of days. I was very surprised about Moritz Seider and what I was seeing out of him. You know, like, I don't know, maybe I'm just not paying much attention or enough attention, but I found myself more drawn to a guy like Jake Wallman, who's been playing with Seider a lot. And Seider just seems to be like, Wallman's the mobile skatey boy who gets to play around with the puck. And Seider has been much less of that from what I've seen this year, which kind of surprises me. Like, that, you know, you know me, I haven't been the biggest Mo Seider guy ever for a few years because of what he was presented as by a lot of Red Wings fans, but he just kind of has stagnated, if not maybe taken a step back, because his game isn't the puck doesn't really flow through him nearly as much as it used to, which seems like it's done on purpose, which is also very confusing. And the other confusing thing, and maybe this is again just, you know, me being rose-colored glasses, but I loved listening and watching Derek Lalonde last year when he was on the broadcasts with the Hockey Night in Canada for the playoffs. I think the way that he sees the game and all of that makes a lot of sense, and how he broke things down was really very interesting. But I guess that doesn't automatically make him a hugely successful coach, because this year has been, they've outperformed expectations a little bit, but I don't know. The last month has been a real rough ride.
But do you think that it's a coaching problem, or do you think that it's a personnel problem? Because at some level, I think you can chalk it to a personnel problem a bit, right?
I think you can.
I think they're a team that needs more speed, and we see it without Dylan Larkin. They're just not playing at the same pace with the same intensity. They're just not getting up there. Like, I think they could use a bit more of that. And it's hard to get a superstar in this league. It's hard to get superstars in any league.
Yeah.
But you do need them to have a championship level franchise.
Well, they went out and got Alex DeBrincat, right? They've got DeBrincat and Kane together again.
Yeah.
Like, they brought in Daniel Sprong, who has also been brutal the last little while. But for a time, Daniel Sprong, when he's really going, he's really good. But I feel like you're right. Like, I think it is more of a personnel thing, especially without Dylan Larkin in the lineup, because they're another one of these teams where it's like, again, it feels like a disconnect between how they build their NHL team and like how they draft and how they see the future of the team. Like, they're going out and spending a lot of money, like JT Compher at $5 million until the end of 2028. Like, that's a lot. Like, I don't mind JT Compher. I don't mind David Perron. I don't mind Robbie Fabry. I don't mind Michael Rasmussen. But all of these guys are making millions of dollars, like a lot of money. And all of these things add up, right? Like, you're a Leaf fan. Think about how many times Lou Lamoriello or Brian Burke spent a bunch of money on middle of the lineup guys and just clogged the lineup with, again, it's like they're not bad
players, but they're just not insanely good enough where you can have all these guys on the same team together. Like, having a JT Compher is good, but having all of these guys at these cap hits is a problem, because you need line drivers.
Yeah, like, you can, if you line up a guy like JT Compher against a lot of other NHLers in the middle of other lineups, they'll probably balance each other out fine, right? Like,
you might even give the edge to Compher, right? It's just
but that's not what you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but that's not what you want, right? Like, you don't want, in the NHL, if you want to be a contending team, you don't want to be a team full of just guys who can hold their own. And I feel like Detroit is one of these teams where there are just a lot of guys who can go out, score 50, 60 points, and just, hold their own out there. Whereas, the real, like, it's kind of the same thing I said earlier. There's just no oomph to the roster. They're either firing on all cylinders or they're losing 7-3, right? It's this weird dichotomy. And then their defense group is, again, the same thing, right? Ben Sherratt and Oli Mata and Jeff Petrie and Justin Hall, even Shane Gostisbehere, who's been pretty good, I would say, this year when I've seen them. He's been pretty good. But Shane Gostisbehere, like, or the rest of those guys, that's 3, 6, 9, that's like $12-13 million tied up in it. Guys where, like, they can hold their own, right? Like, Oli Mata can, I guess, be an NHL player, but, like,
it just seems like they're paying all this money for a bunch of number 4 and number 5 defensemen.
Right. And so they'll either work and be okay, or they will really kind of struggle. Yeah. Like, it's tough. Like, and I don't really know how you dig yourself out of it, right? Like,
they do have 2 good D prospects, as we talked about, and maybe that constitutes a top pair in the future, possibly, but you don't. We'll see how. You
can't bank on
that. Exactly. You cannot bank on that.
I'm a prospect guy. You can't bank on prospects, I don't think. Like, you can't, like, the NHL is so hard nowadays. Like, even if Simon Edvinsson becomes an NHL player, I'm not expecting him to be a really good NHL defenseman, which I think he could be. I wouldn't expect it right away. Like, that could take time, because playing defense in the NHL is really, really hard. And also, there's a lot of names on the roster that they have that veteran experience that, if push comes to shove, might get the experience to play over a guy like Edvinsson, right? It might be tough for a guy like Simon Edvinsson to outplay a Jeff Petrie next year for a job, or outplay a Ben Sherratt, right? Like, because these are these guys who are sort of signed to be entrenched in these roles. And I just don't think you can bank on prospects. Like, we say it all the time. All prospects are bad until they're not, like they're just not NHL ready ever until you just see what you got with them against the NHL competition and see how they do.
They also
and I just saw the
roles to succeed, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Because if you're not,
I do,
you're screwed, essentially.
Yeah. I do really like Simon Edvinsson, and I think that he's sort of the guy that I might say could be a solid, real solid NHL player. But again, like, they don't have the luxury of being in the competition for Macklin Celebrini. They never really had that opportunity. I'm trying to think back to who they could have drafted, right? Like, I don't know. There's a lot, and you can cherry pick certain examples, but and I don't think they've done poorly. But it's just when they do poorly in the draft, it's very poor. Right? Someone mentioned Brady Cleveland in the second round, right? Like, I love Brady Cleveland, but holy smokes, oh boy. But yeah, like, who did Detroit? So Detroit took Lucas Raymond in 2020, and I feel like you don't regret that. 2021 was Edvinsson, and considering who's available, I don't think there's anybody you could point to be better than that. Like, William Eklund went one pick later, I guess. Brant Clark was available, but I think that relative to those other guys, it's kind of a wash.
I think you're fine with that. It's just like, at the end of the day, they don't have enough star power up front. And until they get, and it's going to be hard to go out and acquire that until they get like more star power. And like, they tried with Alex DeBrincat, he's really good, but when you're playing him on the second power play a lot of the time, like, because that's what they were doing when Dylan Larkin was in the lineup. Like, how is that guy supposed to succeed?
Yeah. I mean, luckily they have quite a bit of money coming off the cap this summer, so they have some room to play around with. I saw a couple of comments come in that they're playing Moritz Seider on purpose this way to depress his contract value. That sounds incredibly dumb to me if that's what they're doing.
That's absolutely insane.
That sounds absolutely insane, and something that would, if I were that player, it would ruin my relationship with the team.
That's loser mentality. That's not wanting to pay a player for being good.
That's also ridiculous. I just don't think
that's the case.
I don't think that's entirely. I don't think that's possible, because Moritz Seider would be like, it would infuriate me if I'm a player. I'd be like, I was great the last couple of years. You're telling me to be worse on purpose? Like, insert your favorite swear word,
or
right? Like,
they're
no
trying
way.
to do what teams have done, like what Buffalo tried to do with Tyler Myers and Rasmus Ristolainen, where they take a player that's big and physical and try to turn them into a shutdown guy while killing what makes them special.
Which is always crazy to me. And this year, side note, this year in the draft, there's a lot of guys who I could go that direction. I don't know. It's a crazy year for that type of player, but I agree. I think that's out of control, ridiculous. I think I don't know what is going on. I feel like it's just the coaching sort of wanting him to be a certain way, not on purpose for contract purposes, but on purpose for it's in your best interest, when in reality, based on the numbers at least, it has certainly not been in his best interest or the team's best interest. Like, it just has not been a super great contract year for him. And also, like, if they were doing that with Moritz Seider, then why not do that with Lucas Raymond too, right? Like, Lucas Raymond has been playing really, really well. So why would he get a pass in that? And they let him sort of be good and inflate his numbers, then let their arguably guy who was their best defenseman the last couple seasons be not that this year, just to save money. Like, it makes no sense. So in any case, that was just a passing comment anyway, and whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, they're in a tough spot. And I mean, on that note, since they played Buffalo the other night, I mean, we can chat about Buffalo a little bit. There's the thought in the back of my head where I'm in a battle where on one side I want to get on the Sabres bandwagon, but on the other side
You're
I'm
too
going, yeah, but
to do it because you've seen the results every year and it's always not good.
Yes, and also I was on the Arizona Coyotes bandwagon for a while, and that absolutely has exploded in my face, because they've been terrible as well the last while, I would say, not little while.
Yeah.
They've been brutal the last while. But the Buffalo Sabres, they're 6-3-1 in their last 10. They just blew out the Red Wings. But the main thing I wanted to talk about, and I don't know if you watched much of that game against the Red Wings.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, because I've made a point to go watch Bowen Byram with that team, because we talked about it on the show on Monday about how fascinated all three of us were about how they were going to incorporate Bowen Byram into that roster, and how, with those three guys down the left side, obviously you can play, and they have been playing Dahlin on the right side, and he does not look out of place there at all. That pairing though of Dahlin Byram it's so much fun. Like, it really seems like the Buffalo Sabres, for now at least, have gone to him and been like, let's just let Bowen Byram sort of play the way that he kind of feels naturally his best, right? Like, he's very much like a free-flowing, highly mobile, jump in the offense type guy. Like, he jumped into the offensive zone a bunch of times in both of the games that I watched for Buffalo. And, so right now, at least, they're letting him be the stallion running wild in the field. And honestly, it's worked. Like, it's worked. I think the Buffalo Sabres didn't just get easy goals against Detroit the other night. I think they legitimately looked pretty good and have looked pretty good. Not to say that Bowen Byram has like fixed all of their problems, but their weakness has been on the back end a lot of the time the last couple seasons. And I'm starting to believe that trade to get Bowen Byram isn't going to affect them super much negatively.
Yeah.
But as an offensive defenseman who can supplement Dahlin as an offensive defenseman as well, but in a weird kind of way that works in a sense for me, I think it's going to be very interesting to see them down the stretch. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, like, I'm not counting them out. I don't think they're done. I don't know, man.
I like the way they're trending for sure. I just don't see them trending into a playoff spot at this point, right? Like, especially the way the Islanders are rolling right now. But it's also like, it's okay. It's been a long time for the Buffalo Sabres. They haven't made the playoffs since I was in middle school, which is insane. I remember when I hated Buffalo because they were so good. It's like, when is Buffalo going to be bad? And then they've been bad for the next half of my life, right?
Right.
And it's been like, I want them to be better because that city and that franchise deserves some more wins.
Yes.
They've also been robbed of cups.
Yes.
They have been. Like,
their
it's
poor
pretty
football
sad.
team.
Yeah, like
the poor Bills. Yeah.
Man, it is so sad sometimes with them. But what I like about the move is, think about their pipeline. Because we like and Zach Benson's playing in the NHL right now, and he's been good. You and I both like Yuri Kulik. I'm a Matt Savoy guy.
Noah Ostlund.
Yep.
Sam may as well marry him at this point.
Isaac Rosian as well is pretty decent. Yep. Like, they've got a lot of power with or they got a lot of good players in the prospect pool that are on forward. I think originally what confused us about the move was that it was for a left-hand D.
Yeah.
But they're making it work. So now, more so than ever, I really like that move because Middlestad's 26. They've moved him out. Colorado had a big need, and they addressed it. Buffalo had a big need that they've now managed to work with so far. And there's still time for this to change. Like, teams could get a book on it because it's fresh, right? Like, we were talking about the Red Wings earlier. When Moritz Seider came in the league, he was more of a menace because teams didn't have a book on him the same way that they do now, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you adapt once you become game planned? Like, we've seen with Patrick Laine. He's been game planned. He's also been hurt a ton. And he's not as effective as he once was in his rookie year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, how do you adapt to that? And I think it's going to be a fascinating thing to see going into next year when they actually when teams game plan for Byram, Dahlin as a pair, how they attack them, how they try to defend them, and if after those adjustments they're still as effective, because it might just be a honeymoon period. But overall, I like that move. I'm not, as I said earlier, I don't see a playoff route for this team, at least this year. But next year, it could happen. They also had some issues with Tage Thompson this year. I believe he got injured for an extended period of time, so his production's been down quite a bit. And they've dealt with injuries throughout the year. Like JJ Peterka has been good for them throughout stretches of the year. Like, I like what they've got. You just let that marinate. You let that soup cook, right? You talk about having all the right ingredients. I think they've got the right ingredients. It's just about it manifesting or actually getting cooked properly. You just gotta wait for that time to come.
They are currently 5 points out of a playoff spot, where there are where it's they basically are like, if they are going to challenge for a playoff spot, they're going to need to dethrone the Islanders, and if the Red Wings turn things around, them as well. So it's an uphill battle. It's definitely, I looked at the last few seasons as well after we did our trade deadline show. It is very rare to see like a lot of teams fall out of the playoffs post trade deadline. Like, generally the trade deadline is a decent gauge of who's going to be in the playoffs in some way, shape, or form. Obviously there are exceptions, but, and I don't know. I think that they could get past the Capitals. I don't know how the Capitals are still a team that is somewhat close to the playoffs. They just somehow keep finding ways to win despite allowing over 200 goals this season so far. They've managed to find a way. But it's just very strange to me. So I don't know. I look at the Sabres and I don't know. I don't know if Bowen Byram alone sort of caused a shift in thinking or something.
Well, it's also easier to win games when they're not as meaningful, right? Like, I mean, but now you're getting to a point where it might be again. But once you feel like you're out of it, that pressure's alleviated, and so it becomes easier to win games. There's a reason I have that joke about the Ottawa Senators becoming good once they're like basically out of it. Is because they don't have to worry about making it. At this point, you can just play spoiler and try and make other teams depressed.
But the Ottawa Senators are 3-6-1 in their last 10. So
they're
trying. They're trying.
They beat the Penguins in their last outing.
barely, but they did it.
It took. It wasn't until like the end, closer to the end of the third period, that goals were scored in that game. So, but I think with Buffalo, you should be encouraged. I understand how that can sound, especially when people get encouraged every year by them and they let them down. Don't worry, I know your pain. I'm a Toronto Maple Leaf fan. I understand. But I think there's a lot of encouraging signs there, and I like Don Granato as a coach. He's unlocked Tage Thompson as this offensive monster, and maybe he hasn't been as good this year, but again, you get adapted to a little bit, so there's always some sort of, you come down a little bit, right?
But Buffalo's a decent city. It's a pretty cool place. Great rink. I love the first Niagara Center. I think it's really neat.
Isn't it called KeyBank?
Or did they change? Oh yeah, they changed it to the KeyBank Center. Sorry. When I went there the first time for the World Juniors, it was the first Niagara Center, but they changed the name. You're right. But anyway, regardless, the rink is really cool. I like my time there. They've got a fun organ player down on the concourse thing in the arena, which is fun. Or at least they did the game that I was there. So in any case,
you know, a team to be encouraged by and a specific player to be encouraged by.
Hoomst,
Zach Hyman.
Oh my God. Yeah, we're gonna talk Oilers. Yeah, we're talking Oilers today too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, how can you not? Great game last night against Washington. 7-2, I think it was 7-2. I will say I really liked seeing Ivan Miroshnichenko do the trademark Russian slap shot goal from the boards. Just turn and fire it. He absolutely ripped it.
Gross.
That was an absolutely. I love Ivan Miroshnichenko. One of the I would say might be an underdog. I don't know if he's eligible, but if they nominate him for the Masterton, I like the fact that he had cancer, and within I think 2 years of being drafted and having cancer, he's now in the NHL and like scoring some goals, and well, some, I think it was his second, but um just a pretty cool story with him, and so good for him. And I've been watching him since he was 15 or 16, which is crazy. But yeah, anyway, but the Edmonton Oilers are what we're here to talk about. Stu Skinner gets his 30th win of the season, which is something that I don't think many people expected after the beginning of the year with Jack Campbell in net.
Especially after the beginning of the game, too.
Yep.
First 2 shots were the only 2 goals he gave up all night, and then he was spectacular.
Well, he locked it down
after making a diving save to stop Ovi. Like, there were some golden chances there for Ovi. And
he locked it down so
not gonna
hard.
lie, I was hoping he might have scored on those because I may have had fantasy players who passed him the puck. But yeah, that's just the way it happens sometimes. But like, man, Edmonton's been rolling, and it's been fun to watch. I can sit here and be salty that Zach Hyman is no longer a Toronto Maple Leaf, or I can be happy that Zach Hyman's doing so well, because I look at the position Zach Hyman's in, and yes, he played with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner on the Toronto Maple Leafs, but he wasn't the primary option for Matthews or Marner. He was do the dirty work and you get to score the empty net goals. That's what he did on the Toronto Maple Leafs. On Edmonton, he's the primary goal scoring option for Connor McDavid. Like, McDavid's looking for him out there, and it's awesome. Yeah. It is so awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to be that guy for anyone, right? Like last night, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins found him. Like, just that guy who get into space, make a play,
drive to the net,
keep it simple, go to the net,
greasy goals,
and like it's like Thomas Holmstrom in a way. I don't know if you remember him from years ago, but he was a guy who the Red Wings would just put with their skill guys, with the big boys, and just park him in front of the net, or in transition, just say go to the net, tip it. Goals would go in off of his bum. Like, it didn't matter. And he managed to score a bunch of goals doing that. And Zach Hyman, I think, brings a little bit more than that, but I mean, it's a great role for him to be in. And like
second him with goal scoring this year too.
Yeah, which is insane. I mean, if you put him with someone other than Connor McDavid, maybe he scores fewer, but I don't think he would score like a tremendous amount fewer. It's not like he'd be a 20 goal scorer playing with, Nathan McKinnon, right?
No, he'd probably be like a 30, 35 guy, right? It's just he gets to be the primary option.
Yeah. Especially because Connor McDavid's the guy that everyone's looking for, right? Like Connor, like you said, game plan. How do you game plan the Oilers? Well, Connor McDavid deserves a lot of attention. So what do you do about Zach Hyman, right? Like, you got to win battles in front of the net, and he is pretty good at planting himself. Like, he just plants himself there.
Like,
and
how many times do you see 5 guys all converge on Connor McDavid as he's like carrying the puck up the ice? Like, that's that's how ridiculous he is.
The thing that sticks out to me too about guys like Zach Hyman, that from a hockey analysis point of view, I think is really, 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 really important, is when he's going to the net, and when he does get a little bit of room, like guys leave him alone maybe for a second, he's square to the puck like immediately. Like, he's there to be like, his hips are pointed to the puck, and he's there to bang it in, right? Like, he can extend his reach and tip it if he wants. But if that cross seam pass comes, he's ready for it already, right? And there was a goal, I think one of the goals he scored last night was like that. Someone just briefly abandoned him in front of the net for a second, and I think it was McDavid, slipped a pass through the coverage, and he was square to the puck immediately and just tapped it in.
It's so funny,
it's those
too, right?
little tiny things, right?
Like, he didn't even want the hat trick. He knew the puck went off of him on the Bouchard shot. But he didn't, and they even did an interview with him after the game. It's like, did you know it was yours? And then he looked at them kind of like head down. Yeah, I knew it was mine. But he felt
He's just
bad.
such a good boy.
It's like, that's why Mike Babcock wanted him so badly, because he's so humble, right?
Yeah.
But it's just
why Mike Babcock played him at center with 30 seconds left in a game where his knees didn't work. But, that's neither here nor there.
No, but it's just like, you see a guy like Zach Hyman, I don't even think he'd be this good in Toronto. He just wouldn't. Because as I mentioned before, when you have a guy to play off of, like, McDavid and Draisaitl don't play together at 5-on-5 all that often. Like, they did a bit last night, but that's when Knobloch was loading up the line. It was after a penalty kill where they would just load up, and that's where they scored a lot of those goals, was you had all those options, so they had to account for Draisaitl as well. but it's like Zach Hyman has really he's found money for them. I saw that contract and I thought, okay, he's going to be good for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But when's the fall off going to happen? Like I was really sad to see Zach Hyman go, but I thought, when's the fall off going to happen? And it just hasn't. It hasn't yet. It still could, but he's having a career.
Well, he's
year.
really changed. Like he's really changed, I think, with Edmonton. Like I think he's just really changed, and they found again, it's so much about building a hockey team is understanding is like so much is what do you have in player X and how do you use them in a way that benefits them and benefits the team, right? Like Zach Hyman, he has 46 goals this year and 19 assists. His job is not to be a puck mover, right? Like with Toronto, it wasn't really that much either, but he still was a bit more of a bump and grind, outlet pass guy, like a little bit more involved, but not what he is now, which is like, we're going to park you with Connor McDavid. All you do is find space, like just find some space or create it yourself. And if you can't go to the net and be ready for a pass or be ready for a rebound, be ready to be Zach Hyman, right? Like, and every year he's scored more and more goals with Edmonton. And I think it's just because he's settled into that very sort of niche but important job playing with a guy like Connor McDavid.
And the Leafs couldn't provide the same amount of space for Zach Hyman. Like Connor McDavid flies up the ice. He's never played with players this fast. Like Marner and Matthews are very different. Mm-hmm. Matthews is able to score with very little space. That's what he does extremely well. Like he's just able to score from a lot of different places.
Yeah.
Mitch Marner is about threading the pass into the little space for Austin Matthews. Zach Hyman needs a bit more space than the best goal scorer on the planet. Might I say ever. But sincerely, it's like you look at what Zach Hyman does on Edmonton, it's just a better fit. And you would have never gotten that level there in Toronto.
In the last here's a question. In the last 4 years that he played with Toronto, he scored last 3 years with Toronto. He scored 57 goals in his last 3 seasons with Toronto. Does he break that in this one season? Like he's on pace for 59.
I don't think so.
At this rate.
I just got to be conservative about it. I don't
it's
think
hard.
So. It's also like
when
do you rest your guys too with Edmonton, right? Like that's another consideration.
Well. Yeah.
When do they rest? Because it's like at some point you have to set your priorities for the playoffs. He's going to get to 50. He might even get to 55. But when do you take the seat?
He, just for the record, he is out shooting his career average shooting percentage by about 50% this season. He's at 20%. He's shooting 20% this year, which is crazy. But playing the way that he plays, I could see how your shooting percentage would be quite high.
I don't think he's ever going to score this much again. I think this is a bit of an anomaly season. Like I think he has 4 hat tricks. He has 4 of his 5 career hat tricks this season, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
4 of his 5 career hat tricks.
Yeah.
So that's not a sustainable rate by any stretch of the imagination. But we'll see what he's able to do. I think he's going to be more of like a 35-40 goal scorer from here on out in his career, potentially.
Now that Zach Hyman maybe cools down, so to speak, until the end of the year, does Connor Brown take his place now that he's found his touch to be an elite goal scorer? That's the important question we need to ask.
Dude, I love Connor Brown. I know he hasn't been great with Edmonton, but when he was in Toronto, he was fantastic. It's been injuries that have derailed him here. But that's just a hardworking, fast dude. Like not the same obviously as he was beforehand, but he's just a workhorse. And I'm so glad that he was able to put that puck in the back of the net. You see the ovation. They threw hats for him.
Yeah, I know. He's a cult hero, man. That guy has always been a cult hero.
Even going legend.
Even going back to his days playing with Connor McDavid on the Erie Otters, right? Like, I think they played together. But
I think you're right.
Yeah. Like, just always been just a workhorse guy. I remember when Toronto, like he's such a great example of the types of players that I always target later in the draft, right? He was like a 6th round draft pick because he was, I think, 150 pounds soaking wet and like 5'9" when he was drafted. And he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's now bulkier. And just the work rate that you get out of him and the effort and and he does have skill. Like there is, or maybe not so much these days, but
There was
for
is
like
the thing,
the
right?
reason why he became an NHL player was because he really, really gave it out there, which Mike Babcock loves, but he also had the skill to like make it go. And I think that I don't know, he's been always just a very, very admirable player. A guy who, like you talked about, you said the words, you went over the concept of like how do you pre-scout a player, and how do you adapt when a player can be pre-scouted, like a Patrick Laine. And I think you and I both, a big part of when we look at players, we both would agree that there is a type of player that is very difficult to pre-scout against, right? Like because they
The
just
guy who doesn't
go.
give up.
Yeah, the guys who just go, the guys who want it, and they also have the skill, right? Like the guys who, it doesn't matter if you try to deke around them or if you try to chip and chase it around them or whatever, like they'll figure it out. And if they have the puck, whether it's with their passing or their skating or their brain, you can sort of find ways to get around it. You know, you could target a great shooter, but if that's all they do, then that's an easier pre-scout than someone like a Zach Benson comes to mind, right? Who was just a workhorse with a lot of skill, can finish pretty well, but also a really great mind for making plays around the ice. And
Very crafty
look
guy,
at him now,
right? Like,
crafty guy,
and it's working.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
got a lot more skill than I even remember seeing. Like there's
Right.
been more skilled plays out of him too, even in the NHL. Like his first goal was a between the legs goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It was disgusting.
which is badass.
Absolutely.
By the way, yeah, pretty wild.
So good for him. First goal in 72 games.
Enormous. Yeah, huge
and it's
dub.
in 2
huge
years.
win.
So
The Oilers have a vibe right now, man. They've got the juice flowing. I don't know. It's
yeah, I really like
they're
that
looking
team.
good. Yeah, they're looking, I mean, compared to where they were when they started the year,
Yeah,
you know.
I legitimately view them as a cup contender. Like,
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
in the top 5 of teams this
It is
year.
going to be the West is going to be a bloodbath, but they have a chance. Like they have just as much of a chance as anyone else, right? Like Vegas is there, Colorado, Dallas.
Yeah, like
That's going to be tough,
they
but
might
they
be-
might be able to do it.
Honestly, like if Vegas has trouble with the injuries and like Mark Stone doesn't come back the same, at least for this run, like they might be the best
Yeah.
team in the Pacific.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
And I don't think that's crazy by any means. Like look at the
No.
way their guys are going. They have the best player ever for my money, at least the best player I've ever seen.
Right.
You have a guy like Leon Draisaitl who's even had a quieter year for his standards.
Yeah.
Zach Hyman who's exploding. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins who's a good complementary guy. The defense is all right. Like Evan Bouchard's been fantastic offensively, and Matthias Ekholm has been awesome.
He's been very good. Yeah.
You know, Darnell Nurse has games where he's really great, but there are other times where he's just not that good either. So he's hit and miss, but it's like they've got a solid roster, and I could see it. The question is Stu Skinner enough? Like, there are times where he is, like last night, but also last night you saw 2 goals let in on the first 2 shots.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's weird. Like, I feel like the Edmonton Oilers are either going to go on a deep cup run or they're going to be out in 4. Just like the same thing that happened. Do you remember the COVID year series with Winnipeg?
Oh, yeah.
Winnipeg never led other than when they won those games in overtime, essentially.
Yep.
It could be, it'll either be like that or they're going to go on a magical run.
Well, I mean, that's the only thing that I could say to really poke a hole in the Oilers, because they do have a very good team. But if I'm scouting them going into the playoffs, and I am a team like Vegas or even Dallas or Colorado, even in LA, like if they play, they could very well play LA in the first round. I mean, the LA Kings really took it to them last year too, and they almost beat them. And the LA Kings, I would argue, I mean, when they're playing well, I would argue they're better than they were last year.
I think they're just about the same, honestly.
With a guy, okay, but even then, like with a guy like Connor McDavid out there, it's the playoffs, man. Like, how much is Connor McDavid going to put the team on his back and actually produce when he is the target, right? Granted, it's more difficult. He's done it. He's done it before, right? But not for 4 rounds, you know. And it's going to be interesting. I don't know. They're going to be interesting. I think they have a lot of they got a lot of hope on the pathway to the Stanley Cup. I think they have a lot of hope, but that West is tough now. Like, that's tough. That's a tough group of teams.
Speaking of the West, do you want to quickly touch on Nashville and just talk about their nice run, and then we'll give your boy. Yeah. Let's first give your boy Murat Kuznetsov a shout out.
Quick.
He's gonna. You take it away because this is your.
Well,
boy.
Yes. My adoptive son from somewhere in Russia. I can't remember where he's from. I should probably know that by heart, but I don't. But yeah, shout out to Murat Kuznetsov. First NHL game tonight. Another case of a Russian that people were scared would not come over, and here he is, right? Jumping straight into the NHL. Really, I mean, again, I've said this before, but I'm not expecting him to be an enormously remarkable NHL player. But I do think he will be a very useful one, a guy that coaches will adore. Bill Guerin said as much today that they just love the hardworking, really smart players like him, which totally checks out. Guys like Liam Ogren are part of that world as well. But yeah, Kuznetsov getting into the lineup right away is great. The Wild are, I mean, probably out of the playoffs. They have not been super. They've been good the last 10 games, but I don't think they're a playoff team. And they can sort of just let him feel it out and see how it goes. I think he's fast enough and intense enough and selfless enough, I think, is a big part of being a young player in the NHL. You know, he's a really great puck distributor and a really, really great, admirable, pacey guy. So I think he'll be able to hold his own in the NHL. And even if he plays the next 15 games and has 3 points, I wouldn't be surprised. I also would not be disappointed. Just a guy who I love watching play. And I'm really, really happy he's in the NHL. So big shout out to Murat Kuznetsov for what he's going to do tonight. And I definitely will be watching that game because I just want to see him play. It would be a lot of fun. But the Nashville Predators, man, if we're talking about how hard the West is going to be to get through, the Jets beat the Jets last night quite handily. The shots were quite lopsided for a large portion of that game. When they played the Columbus Blue Jackets the other night, they did not have a shot for the Blue Jackets did not have a shot for 15 minutes, and by then the shots were 18-1.
That is insane.
It was, or 18-0, I should say, when Columbus got a shot. They have the second best shot differential over the last month in the entire league. Are they ever going to lose again? They've been 8-0-2. They have, I think it's 14 games straight where they have a point at least.
It's pretty ridiculous.
And they're sitting in the top wildcard spot with a record better than LA's. So they've just been on an absolute tear. UC Saros has also been great.
Praise be.
I mean, yeah, praise be. Roman Josi has been very good. Tommy Novak has been very good the last stretch. Gustav Nyquist has been on fire as well. That when I've been watching the Preds here and there over the last couple of weeks, like Gustav Nyquist, who's always been a good player, but he's just on a rip down there. He's been playing really, really well.
Philip Forsberg's had an outstanding season.
Philip Forsberg as well.
Finally, somebody is leading the team in points and is not named Roman Josi for like the first time in 4 years.
Yep. And I'm a big Philip Forsberg guy. It's I mean, again, the West is a bloodbath. It's a slog. Right now it looks like they're going to be drawing against Vancouver in round 1.
That would be
things started tomorrow.
Awesome matchup.
And that would be incredible. Yeah. That would be an incredible
upset. Like, I actually think that could be an upset.
100%. I think Nashville could take it to them. I still might give the edge to Vancouver.
Yeah.
But only insofar as like the top unit Vancouver has is absurd. JT Miller is on a different planet this year.
Especially last night too. Like the first shift of the game comes out and just wills it in, and then even on he gets Ilya Mikheyev off the schneid. I think it was like a 30 something, or like it was definitely in the 20s or 30s, like low 20s or low 30s goalless streak for Mikheyev, and he just wills Mikheyev into a goal. It's amazing. JT Miller, I think honestly, JT Miller might have been their best player this year. Like it's kind of crazy.
Oh yeah, him and Quinn Hughes at least. Yeah,
but like Elias Pettersson, I would have thought. Like going into this year, Elias Pettersson, I thought was the best player on that team, and I still think long term he is. But man, Jonathan Tanner Miller, what a guy!
Unreal. And yeah, I think that series would be great. I still think I give the edge to Vancouver with that top unit, but if that top unit goes cold for like the worst possible time for 3 games, I think they're like Nashville kind of does have some depth there. That I mean, Vancouver's got a good team for sure,
and they do have some good depth too. It's true.
Yep, they do. Yeah, but that would be a pretty crazy series, and I don't think I would immediately give the edge to Vancouver or immediately like say that it's Vancouver's series to lose.
I think what's going to be tough with that series if it happens is you look at Roman Josi, and he's a guy that loves to activate into the play, and like the Preds scored a lot in transition last night. Like they did a fantastic job at just weaving through the neutral zone and just making it really hard for the Jets to combat them. And it's like what's going to happen when like Ian Cole and Tyler Myers are out there and Roman Josi's coming down with the puck.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Like that's why I think it could be there's some upset potential. Like I don't know that I take Nashville in the end. I think it's a 7-game series that Vancouver ekes out.
Yeah.
But like that'll be insane. And I think like, with Nashville, it's just you got to cancel U2 tickets in the Sphere and and look at what they've done, man. But I also think the coach is really good. Like I'm a huge fan of Andrew Brunette. I was selfishly hoping that he would become the next head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs in the offseason, but nope, that didn't happen. And now look at how Nashville's faring. Like he's a really good coach. Barry Trotz, who was the best coach I've seen for a long time, identified his talent and brought him in. And that team is trending in a really good direction. Like I think we looked at Nashville as this middling team, even as of a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Right? But they do have good players. They have an outstanding goaltender. They have one of the best defensemen in the league, even if it's not on the defensive end that you see his full potential.
Right.
They got
really Tyson Barrie.
Yeah, that's true. Leafs
they
legend.
Got Tyson Barrie and Luke Shen.
Leafs legend. Ryan O'Reilly, Leafs legend. How many other Leafs legends do they have?
I believe that's it.
Yeah, it's probably it.
Yeah.
But still, it's
I'm looking at their roster now.
I like them. I think that, like, I don't know that they're ever going to be like true contenders with the way their roster is currently constructed. But if they could attract a big name free agent at some point, like, that could definitely change. But I like the way they're trending. Yeah,
I agree. I've really liked the Predators, especially recently. Obviously, it's hard not to with how good they've been. I mean, yeah, like and I'm looking at it now. I don't think there is a single. You look at all 8 teams in the West that are probably going to be making the playoffs, and I don't think I would bet significantly against any of them in any of these playoff series.
Who would you say is the worst of those teams? Because I've got a clear worst of those 8 in my mind.
I want to say LA.
Yeah, that's the one.
But that's only because LA just had such an awful mid part of the year.
But I also don't think they're as good as they were to start the year, right? It's like they gave up a lot of pieces for Dubois, and he's a good player, but is he worth that price? No. They don't have outstanding goaltending by any means. Like they have a tandem of Riddick and Talbot. Like that is true. That's not something I would be confident about. And they don't like Anze Kopitar was an elite level player for years, and he's still a really high end player. But like right now, who's their best player? Like
Quinton Byfield.
Maybe a Kevin Fiala or an Adrian Kempe.
Yeah.
But like they're not superstars, right? Like they're really high end players, maybe bordering on that. But
yeah, the thing I would say is they're deep.
They are deep.
They don't have a lot of star power really, like in modern NHL speaking terms. But like you look up and down their roster, right? Like Fiala, Danault, Kempe, Moore, Byfield, Lizotte, Turcotte even has been playing pretty well. Kaliev, Trevor Lewis is still there somehow.
Dubois,
but
when
like
when he really gets
yeah,
hot,
Dubois
is awesome.
On the back end, you've got Doughty and Gavrikov, Mikey Anderson, Jordan Spence. Matt Roy's been good this year as well, but
I like him.
You know, like they're like, so when you look at a team, so when you look at teams that are, you know, maybe they have that, like Edmonton, for example, that star power up front. It's like, yeah, you'll win that battle for sure. But then those guys come off the ice, and the LA Kings are throwing like Blake Lizotte and Trevor Moore over the ice for their third line. And it's like, well, okay, like
Henrique now that you shored up with, right? Like that's the other thing.
Sure.
And
I guess.
I don't know. I just don't think LA is that much of a threat. Like
the goaltending as a whole. The goaltending is a problem. That's the problem for me. But
we'll see.
They're playing Stuart Skinner, right? Like it's going to be Skinner versus Talbot, right? So who knows, right?
I take Skinner. I think I take Skinner.
Same, but I don't know. The Oilers are a weird team, but when they go, they really, really go. But yes, I think based on all things considered, the Kings are probably the team that is the worst of them. But I don't know. Where would you put LA in the East, right?
In the East?
When you've got Florida, Bruins, Toronto, the Rangers,
Carolina.
Hurricanes, Flyers, Tampa, the Islanders, the Red Wings. Like I would take the LA Kings over the Wings, the Islanders, maybe. Goaltending wise, the Islanders win there, but would I take them over Tampa? That's tough, I think. I think that's tricky. Even though Tampa's in a bit of a down year,
I think they're like
quote unquote.
6th or 7th in the East.
Yeah, I think so too.
Right, and
rather than 8th in the West.
Yeah, but the East is clearly the weaker conference this year, in my opinion, and you're not moving up a sizable amount.
Yeah. I guess the point that we're making is that the West is ridiculous. Once again, and the Kings I think the Kings are a good team. They look good. They had a really awful middle of the year, but they look good. But they're still probably like, I wouldn't take them to beat Vegas. I wouldn't take them to beat Vancouver. I don't think I'd take them to beat Winnipeg or Dallas. I don't think so, or Colorado. But who knows? I don't know. But anyway, we're talking about the Predators, and I don't know. I don't know if I buy that the Predators are like elite now. Like they just will never lose again.
They're not.
But they are certainly finding their footing at a time where it's very important to do so. And if UC Saros can be UC Saros at his best, then look out.
I'm so excited for the playoffs. I think.
Oh my god, fun. I know. Ooh, we gotta do things for the playoffs, man. We're gonna have some fun. I think just because there's like the first round of the playoffs are alone just like the best sporting event ever. It's so much fun.
I'm gonna have a ton of fun until my team's eliminated and want to cry. But that's how it is every year. So
you'll recover just like you do every year. Trust me. I've been living in Toronto my whole life. You figure you'll get there. It's all right. Then you'll find someone else to love. You know, plenty of fish in the sea. There's 31 other fish in the sea. No. I guess in the playoffs there would be, you know, if the Leafs get eliminated in the first round, there would be 8 other fish in the sea. So, you know, the oceans are polluted, but they're not that polluted yet. But anyway, we can move on to the chat questions. So again, any viewers of the show, if you would like to throw in some questions, please feel free to do so. Looks like a bit of a quiet one so far today, but that's okay. It's a Thursday afternoon, and it's all good. But before we get to chat questions, we are going to do our mid-show ad read. So you can support us through Fanatics. You can use our affiliate link code below, or scan the QR code to provide a small kickback to the show on anything you buy in the store. You can also support us, both myself and Sam McGilligan, my co-host, who shows up sometimes. You can support us with Puck Preps Hockey subscription to get all of your NCAA and CHL prospect needs. I'm working on some guys, some reports on some guys who are currently playing high school hockey in Minnesota now that season has wrapped up. So I'm taking a look at those guys. Fractal Hockey Consulting as well supports the show, where it's my business for hand track targeted player analysis. and recruitment packages for the NCAA Europe and beyond, with solutions for organizational needs of any kind. And of course, if you're interested in playing in front of some European team scouts and getting some cool opportunities over there, get in touch with me and we'll hook you up with the Golden Bucket Tournament. Or you could subscribe to Scouching. There's a word. You could subscribe to Scouching.ca for exclusive access to innovative data tools, providing tons of unparalleled insights into draft prospects and players making their way into the NHL. So, chat questions time. Let me just scroll back up to the top here. Yes.
At some point, Will and I are going to be working on little scouting reports for YouTube Shorts and TikToks. And because it's that time of year where Will's data gets close to being tracked and he feels pretty confident about the guys he's got, those are going to be coming out. Yep. I don't know, say maybe a week or 2 weeks from now, that will get them pumped out and ready to go. Sort of like mini scouting reports, bite size.
Yeah, I've got to finish some games on some guys, especially like the guys that started early in the year. The Russians, I think, are the closest to being done. So once we get those done, then I'll be ready to go, and we'll start throwing some stuff out there a little bit more like the old stuff we used to do.
Yeah, so just look out for that and follow our TikTok for those, because
you could do that too.
We want to stream on TikTok too, just get as big of an audience as we can, and
it'd be so good.
Even if you can't support us monetarily, likes and everything else helps.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we'll get on TikTok before they ban it. Who knows? That'd be nice. TikTok live streams to celebrate the end of TikTok.
Don't worry, that's just in the States.
Yeah, it's true. Only the biggest market in the world. That's all.
Hey, our market's all Canadian, essentially.
It is. There's a lot of Canadians. Yeah, that's true. Oh, boy.
Now to you, the viewers, the lovely people
now
to
the viewers. The Wings are cooked because everybody but Raymond stopped trying when Larkin got hurt. Yeah, I mean, that's not a terrible assessment. They clearly are a different team without him. But that's an interesting point there, is we talk about this all the time. It's how important centers are. Like, the Red Wings have needed another center to lock up that lineup forever. And teams, like, I know drafting centers, often teams chase centers around and look for them or whatever. But sometimes, like a Berkeley Catton this year, I don't know if he'll make it to the Red Wings pick, but if he does, a guy like that behind a Dylan Larkin one day is a great idea. But Dylan Larkin, to me, is such a great center on that team and a real difference maker. And when you don't have him, you notice, right? Like, the Red Wings do kind of have that lack. You go, man, a Dylan Larkin would look real good on this team and fill a lot of the gaps.
There's a reason he's still there, tough. And Bertuzzi and Mantha aren't, right? Because he's the cornerstone.
Yep. Oh boy, what are your thoughts on Matt Rempe? He actually seems impactful aside from fighting and hitting. Could you look at his analytics? I believe he has the second best expected goals for since joining the Rangers. Okay, so you're right. It is true that Matt Rempe's analytics have been very, very good. But he's playing like 4 minutes a night, so he's just, the sample size is impossibly small. And the other thing too is I believe that his results are very much defense first. So he is outperforming his team on average, but I think it is very largely driven from his defense. I will also come back to it, but I'd be curious to see who he's playing with. It's been Adam Edstrom, I think, here and there, and Barclay Goodrow.
It's like fourth line,
right,
with a bunch of big, beefy boys.
Like, I don't know. I've watched Matthew Rempe actually playing hockey this year for the Rangers, and I just don't think he's that useful of an NHL player outside of psychological warfare, which, take that for what you will. I don't know. So I'm just looking now. Oh my God. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I wish I could show you. But looking at Hockey Viz, which is Micah McCurdy's website, his expected goals rate is 1 per 60, which is 58% lower than league average with him on the ice. Without him on the ice, the Rangers are league average. So his results are basically all defense, because offensively, relative to the league average, he's negative 17%. And without him on the ice, the Rangers are also league average, basically. So he's killing the Rangers offense by about 15 to 20% on any given minute that he's on the ice. but defensively, teams are getting chances that lead to goals 58% less of the time. So if you sit back and just hit whoever has the puck, yeah, you could play in the NHL and whatever, but you're not going to drive a whole lot of offense. So he is a net positive player right now for the Rangers, but only insofar as they're not getting scored on with him on the ice yet. And they also are not scoring with him on the ice, but they are not getting scored on more than they are not scoring less. I don't know if that made sense, but it doesn't matter.
To me,
I don't know.
he's like a net neutral at the end of the day. And then there's a little bit of a positive impact in the sense that he's got the fun factor, as well as like he goes out and does provide the psychological and physical warfare, right? So I think there's a useful NHL player there. It's not our kind of useful NHL player. And I don't think you're not going to see him be like this really high-end bottom six player. He's just like a decent, or he's a guy that is big and physical and is fun to watch, but really there's not a ton of substance to the results.
Yeah. I think like the way I see it with him is if I see him on the lineup for the other team and it's guys that I have in my philosophy that I like, I'm not scared of him. I like he's either going to take penalties against my team because he has to, or he's going to get thrown out of the game because he takes a really bad penalty when he's frustrated because he has to. Like I just get the feeling that it's, like there's a certain brand of hockey that can work in a way, but when push comes to shove, doesn't work when you place a guy like this against real high-end NHL competition.
Unless he kills them and
unless he kills them, right?
Right? Like
which cool, like that. Do what you want, right? Like he killed a guy the other night, and he's sitting for a suspension for it, right? And he, like he does have that antagonist attitude with him, and that's probably why he's in the NHL.
Yes, which by the way, I was very wrong about. I just thought he wouldn't get punished because of other things.
Yeah, you were extremely wrong about that.
You know what? That's fine. I'm glad to be wrong about that.
Yeah, but I mean that was a terrible play. But it's gonna be interesting because I just get the feeling that there's a shiny new toy, and I think the NHL. I was gonna look this up today and I forgot, but I feel like since he played his first NHL game, fighting has gone up in the NHL a lot. You see a lot more fights now. I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I'm at least feeling like that's the case. And if that's the case, like it's the same attitude that I had like 10 years ago when fighting was still kind of around and, Colton Orr was in the NHL and whatever. It's like, okay, you can do that, but teams over time will start to learn that you can beat that somewhat easily. Like the psychological side of this sort of thing, I think is really overblown. I think the scare them into submission side of things is really overblown and nonsense. So I don't know. I just get the feeling with him, it's like his job is sit back, give the puck to someone else when you have it, and hit people, right? If someone has the puck, destroy them. And if they don't have the puck and your team has it, go to the net or pass the puck to someone else and then go to the net. Right? Like, and that could be your job. He's making a lot more money than I am doing that job, which I can't fault him for. So anyway,
I think at the end of the day, he's an effective player, but a limited player.
I just think over time he's going to get
it's just not
figured out.
It's not very effective. It's minimally effective. Like he's an NHLer, so he's at some level effective, but it's not like he's a world beater, except for when he beats the world out of his opponents in fights.
Right. Literally beats them half to death. Okay, so we got a question about Michael Hage, who has been indeed on a rip recently. Let me look here. Yeah, he's got 61 points in 46 games this year, 42% involvement on a team that has not been good in Chicago this year. They've been better, obviously, because he's scoring a lot, but they haven't been great. I haven't seen Michael Hage in a while, so it's well overdue for me to do so. But I've always really had a big spot in my first round for him. I'm just looking up where I have him now. I want to say 24th on my list. His average rank is 26. And I feel like he could end up higher than that for me, but I don't think he's going to go too much higher. Again, like a really, really skilled guy, really tenacious. He's not a perimeter driven guy, which is great to see out of a scoring forward. You don't want to see a guy who just peppers the net with shots or low percentage chances and just scores in volume. He's a quality guy, makes plays, shoots the puck himself, a really, really talented player. The only weakness for me is like he's a very much a guy who needs space to play his style of play. He needs time to think and plan out his pass attempts and all of that stuff a lot of the time. And his footwork isn't really quite good enough to get away with that continuously. And it does kind of close him out, but maybe that's something that's changed recently, which is leading to his scoring increases. So I'll take another look at him, obviously, because it's well overdue. And I always enjoy watching Michael Hage. Tony Ferrari says we're doing a good job, so that means we're not. That's cool.
Appreciate the kind words, Tony.
Yeah, sure. Let's compare, contrast, and project. Oh my goodness, draft year: Matejchuk, Michikov, Parekh, and Levshinov. I mean, they're all extraordinarily different. Matejchuk is all give me the puck and let me do what I want type guy. Michikov is more of a physical version of that. I would say his skating isn't as good as Michikov, but as Matejchuk, but he has the same sort of daring confidence and skill level. It just isn't as high a pace player, and I think his defensive game is a little bit better than Matejchuk, especially with the sort of physicality that he's got. Zane Parekh is Matejchuk without the skating and worse defense, I think. Like a guy who really, really just some moments defensively you go, okay, that's not going to work. That just is not going to happen. But a really smart passer more than anything. A lot of his offense, I mean, I've done the math on this. I've done, I think, 5 games of Parekh to this point. A lot of his offense at 5-on-5 comes from just peppering the net from the perimeter. I think he's responsible for 32% of Sagina's shot attempts with him on the ice when I've tracked him, which is for a defenseman ridiculous. Like if there's 5 guys on the ice and they all shoot the puck equally, it's 20%. He's doing 31 as a defenseman, which is crazy. So for him, it's a lot of, I think the part that I'm really interested in is his ability to sort of, like Roman Josi does this a lot, where it's like he'll carry the puck. He's not the fastest or most skilled guy, but he'll carry the puck to one side and slip a pass back through the feet of the guy who's chasing after him to a guy who swapped spots with him, or like just finds ways to make space for people. And that kind of works on a really good team like Saginaw. But a very different player from Minchukov and Matejchuk. Levshinov is the most fun out of all of them. I think he's sort of the modern reincarnation of Dion Phaneuf in a way, where he's a guy, he skates like Dion Phaneuf. He's out there skating like, like a linebacker in football with with those old school neck rolls on. He's a super physical guy. I think he's a pretty good sort of small distance passer, good vision that way. And in the offensive zone, granted, almost all of the offensive plays I've tracked out of him this season came in the first game I tracked against Canisius College, which is not a high-level NCAA team. And ever since, he's been much more of a sort of two-way impact guy. There are troubling things with Levshinov, but things that I don't think can be really super concerned about. It's more of a, you got to be patient and bring them along with time. And, the NHL is going to be hard for him. I think it's going to be hard for him playing the way he is playing, but I think it's entirely possible that he's a solid NHL defenseman. But I don't know if the Rover style is really going to work for him. Are there any of the end of the first, early second round defensemen the Sharks should target with the 33rd and 34th pick? So if you want my answer, I mean, I'm going to throw a guy like Alphonse Frey out there. Maybe if you like a Kalen Addison type guy on that team, maybe him. And I think I like him more than I liked Kalen Addison. If Adam Jiricek somehow falls out of the first round, that would be immediately the first name that I go for. Who outside the first round in there, Dominic Badinka would be another one that I think Badinka would make a lot of sense for San Jose. I think if I'm Mike Greer and wearing my Mike Greer hat, Dominic Badinka makes sense, or a Stian Solberg. I would think though that it would more likely be someone like a Charlie Ellick, or who else could be in there? Ben Danford, maybe. Again, I wouldn't do that, but I'm trying to think like the San Jose Sharks, because they have a very different idea of what they like in the draft relative to what they used to draft with Doug Wilson Jr. running the show. What else do we have here? Yeah, we got one thing Tampa doesn't. Brady Cleveland. Yeah, it's true. When I'm in a Ryan Lomberg of the MHL competition and my opponent is Anton Bitev. Oh, David's trying to, David's being David to me. I was talking to him privately about Anton Bitev, who's a re-entry in Russia who played at the U18 level last year and just dominated, and played pretty well with a lot of Togliatti this year, but then they traded him to Spartak Moscow, who was using him as a spare forward, which is bizarre to me because every time I watch him, I think he's pretty good. I've been frustrated with Steve Yzerman's drafting. Marco Kasper and Nate Danielson are dogs, but I see them as secondary players. I mean, I don't know if I'd call Nate Danielson a dog, but Kasper certainly is. But yeah, I agree. I mean, Marco Kasper, when he was drafted in the top 10, like I remember making the draft recap video for them and going, yeah, like I see why you pick a guy like that. He's a very well-rounded, projectable guy, but I did not see a top 10 pick out of him like at all. And I felt like it was a situation where a team just knew their guy. They just had their guy. And sometimes that works, right? Like they did that with Moritz Seider. He was their guy and it worked. Marco Kasper, like that one might kind of sting a little bit. Like you're probably going to end up with like a good middle six guy forward. He can play wing. He can play center. I don't know. I feel like that might have been a troubling one a little bit.
You're getting more of what you have than what you need.
Yeah. Like, do you like JC Comfort? Do you like Andrew Kopp? Do you like those guys? Because Marco Kasper's more of that, right? Like, cool. You need guys like that. Do you draft them in the top 10? I don't know. I don't know about that one, Chief. And Nate Danielson, like I see Nate Danielson as a guy with a lot of potential, and when he is really cooking, he's quite good. But he's a very much an up and down guy, not super involved in play, and up and down both production wise and literally on the ice, like up and down, good skater, good straight line guy. You know, it can be a thing. I would not have drafted him in the top 10. Thoughts on Ilya Ivansov? Yeah, everyone's talking about this guy. I think he's been in the KHL this year. I mean, I've been watching him for years, and he is a lot of fun to watch. And Severstal Sharapovets is the youngest team in the KHL. They've got my boys, Timur Mukhanov and Vladimir Grudinin on that team. Timur Mukhanov, by the way, back in the MHL now that Severstal is eliminated. And Mukhanov has, I think, 4 goals in his first 3 games back in the junior league. So good for him. Yep, good for him. Good for the brand. But I like Ivansov. I just wonder if he's just going to be a good KHLer. I don't see, like he's been given a lot of minutes on Severstal. He's a very high impact, high role player on that team, and he's not extraordinarily productive. That team did sort of struggle to keep up with the better teams in the league, but that makes sense because they're so young. But he's very skilled. It's like a Dmitry Buchelnikov type thing. It's like I can see them working on big ice or not big ice in the KHL, but softer defensive pressure, more freedom to sort of play how they want. And that sort of high pace, smaller frame, skatey boy type game kind of works like a little bit better. Kind of like the similar way that I feel to Jiri Lassila. Lassila is doing really well in the Liga this year. He did really well with the World Juniors. Would I draft him? No, I don't think so. Just because I just don't think it's quite enough to get there. Now, would I sign Ilya Ivansov when his contract expires in 2026? when he's 23 years old, I think that's entirely possible, right? I certainly think that's entirely possible. I'm just not thinking that Ivansov is a guy that I would jump out to draft, but he has been indeed a lot of fun to watch. I will say that he's a lot of fun to watch. The Red Wings are going to draft Carter Yakimchuk at 15 because Yzerman. I mean, that wouldn't. I could talk about Carter Yakimchuk forever. And AJ, if you ever get the chance, you should go into the vault of mine and look at what I've got of Yakimchuk. I'm going to
start getting into that.
Carter Yakimchuk is such a weird player. I know there are players in the NHL that are like him. I just don't think they're phenomenal players. With Yakimchuk, I saw him as an opponent in one of the games that I watched this week so far. I forget who it was. And he was not great in his own end and not a great, quarterback running pucks up the ice, which is the case in every game I've tracked. But holy smokes, when he gets the puck in the offensive end and a forechecker goes after him at the blue line, he will dangle you and just take the puck to the net. He doesn't do it particularly quickly, but he doesn't have to. He's a bizarre player. I could see him going really high. I mean, I think that Corey Pronman's ranking is based a lot off of talking to NHL people. And I think the same thing about Sam Cosentino. And I get the feeling that Carter Yakimchuk, who is ranked 4th on Corey Pronman's list right now, I saw him dangle guys a bunch of times this season in the offensive zone, and I could see NHL teams seeing that hard to pass up on. But for me, I think there's a lot of other guys that I would certainly, especially younger players, that I would certainly put my weight behind before him. Here's an interesting one. Do you think hockey is a strong link or a weak link sport? A weak link sport is a sport where usually the team with the better, weaker players are the best, like soccer, or a strong link sport where the better teams are the ones with the most amount or better stars. I mean, I don't think it's like the NBA. I don't think the NHL is like a strong link team. But I also don't think it is like soccer. I think the big factor there is the number of people on the playing surface at a given time, right? Like it's the same amount as the NBA, but they circulate significantly more often. And in soccer, there's 11 of them. So you do not touch the ball all that often in a soccer game just by the numbers, right? You will, obviously. It's not like you never touch the ball. It's just you touch the object of the game is to take an object and put it in some sort of goal. In soccer, you do not touch that object very much because there are 20 guys on the field and 2 goalkeepers. In basketball, you have 24 seconds to get the ball in the air towards the goal. So you've got to move the ball around. You have to. So there's a lot of guys that are touching it, and you play most of the game if you're a star. So that's, if you're good at those things, then yes, it makes sense. Hockey kind of sits in the middle. Like you're going to touch the puck a lot. So having really good players, it matters. But those players don't play 40 minutes. They play 20 maybe, right? Especially at 5-on-5, maybe 18. Right? Like at most 20 minutes.
A forward, you're going to play maybe like a top line forward. You're going to maybe play 22, 23 minutes a night. Like, and that's a heavy night. There are some like defensemen that play 30 on really heavy nights.
Like the way I see it is like, it's like if I'm thinking with the idea of linkages or like a chain of some kind, it's like the NHL is a loose chain, but the individual parts of the chain all have to be really, really strong, right? Like they all should be really, really strong, because a weak link in the chain, we talk about this all the time. How many teams are out there with good players up at the top of their lineup and just crap down the lineup, or at least like replacement level guys, and they struggle to win, right? It's like the teams that have players and don't have players on the same team, like Ottawa, for example, right?
I think it's closer to a weak link than a strong link.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
It's a very random and chaotic game because
possession more so than
fluid.
Soccer. Yeah.
There is. Like also
the
in
surface
soccer,
is small.
Well, the surface is small, and there's no out of bounds either, except for upwards, right? Like
except when it goes out of bounds, but
out of not a side to side boundary, the same way that there is in other sports.
No,
so there's
it's not quite
weird
the same.
Bounces that go off of the boards. Like the boards add this whole element of randomness to the game of hockey that isn't captured in any other sport, I think, because in football you have the sideline. You go out of that sideline, you're off the playing surface, and that's the end of the play. Same thing with basketball. You go out of bounds, that's the end of the play, and possession goes the other way.
And with hockey too, it's like even just the fact that it's played on ice with a very tiny object that you have to put into the goal also makes it even more random and more, you
also have goalies
strange
too, right? Like, and
a
good goalie can make it even more random because you could be facing somebody insane like UC Saros last night, and the Jets just weren't converting on a lot of really high quality chances initially, and then sagged as the game went on because they went down a significant amount, and that changes how the game is played. Where in like basketball, goaltending is a foul. Essentially, like you get the points. You get the points if the ball's goaltended.
Yeah, you are more of a soccer guy than me.
Yes.
Football. Do you know off the top of your head like what a struck soccer ball that goes into a net generally is traveling at? Like what speed?
No, not.
Because I have no idea. And that's the other thing too.
Goals in soccer,
hockey,
like the sample of shots, like when you shoot, it's more likely to go in soccer at a closer distance. Like, because in hockey, there's tons of shots, and like let's say there's 30 shots a game, and maybe 3 go in. I think in soccer, it's like if there's 8 or 9 shots, maybe 2 or 3 go in sometimes.
Yeah.
Like on target, that is.
Yeah.
And that's a rough, like I'm not super into the soccer analytics, but obviously I value them a bit. I just haven't seen a ton of them. But it's like hockey.
Well, they're very similar to hockey, honestly. Like a lot of it it's a similar concept.
But also in soccer, like there's 11 players and they have more defined roles that they do.
And there's more room.
And you can, because it's more of a team, like there's a lot more players on the field or pitch at a certain time. It's like guys can have more defined roles and do the one thing that they do good and be effective. I think in hockey you need to be good at a bunch of different things in order to be really effective, where in soccer, if you can defend really well and use your physicality to muscle guys off balls and then just quickly make a short pass or an outlet pass to a fullback, and then they can go up the field and try and drive possession into the offense, like on the other half. Like that's kind of your role, right? Like in hockey, you want your defenseman to be able to carry the puck a little more across the playing surface. Like you can't have 2 guys on your team defensively, I find, where they just don't carry the puck or can't really make a good outlet pass.
Right. Just for the record, looks like football strikes generally at the highest levels are around 70 to 80 miles an hour. Those are like the high end. So you've got a bigger object going into a bigger net at a lower speed than a lot of hockey shots, which I don't know. Hockey is just kind of its own thing. It's kind of crazy.
It's alien. It's really weird.
It's a weird. I mean, it is a very alien sport for sure.
Like I would say it's the most synthetic of all the sports. Like because other sports are a lot more natural to how you would come to the conclusion of that's a sport. Football, you throw a ball, you try and stop an object, like you try and stop them from getting to a certain spot, and then you kick a field goal if all goes well, or maybe all doesn't go well, right?
Yeah.
In soccer, you just kick the ball. Try to put it in the net. In hockey, there's an ice surface, and then there's all this equipment, and then there's boards, right? And then there's skates, which adds a whole other element to things. Like hockey is just its very own different thing. I would say it's the most similar to sports like soccer and basketball, but more so soccer, I think. But still, it's like it's very different.
You ever seen Sapakta Crow?
I have never even heard of that.
it's volleyball, but with a tiny little hollow ball, and you use your feet. You can't use your hands. So it's a big sport in Southeast Asia. So if this all fails, then I guess I could do analytics for Sapakta Crow because I love that sport. Anywho, this might be a bit early, but have you watched Mikey Burchild and Landon DuPont? So Joel Henderson won't shut the hell up about Landon DuPont. So I have seen him a few times. He's very, very good. Very Bowen Byram like type player, just a guy who you give him the puck and he just goes and goes and goes and can score and score and score. Burchild, I have no idea. I've never really watched him, but I know he's very good. I've been told he's been very good by people I trust. So there's that. The Ottawa Senators think the NHL draft has PWHL draft rules. Well, that would be fun. Let's see who they pull out of their hat at the draft this year.
I think that has to do with the losing once you're eliminated.
Oh, right. Okay.
Or sorry, even winning once you're eliminated. My apologies.
They've also still been bad, right?
Yeah.
Is Zach Hyman what TJ Ginla could be? I think TJ Ginla is a little bit more skilled, like a more of a pure skill guy, but the work rate is there. Like if you want to, Ginla's a very interesting player. I don't know what his NHL job is going to be, but he will have an NHL job. He's a very intense guy, skilled, pretty smart puck distributor, really good shooter. Just a really good sort of dynamic player who really works his tail off, and you can tell. And yeah, there might be some echoes of Zach Hyman there, but I think he's more of a finesse player than Zach Hyman was at this age. We were talking about Connor Brown earlier, and Connor Brown for a while, he was an extremely productive junior player. I think Ginla is a bit more of a solid power guy than Connor Brown, but the work rate and the skill level and the sort of high intensity style of play is kind of similar. And that's only just because Connor Brown is in my mind from talking about him earlier in the show. But I would say he's different, but in the same neighborhood, I suppose. How high could Michael Hage realistically climb on draft day? I think teams will note that the skating with him is not super well-rounded. Like, it's good, but it's not super high-end. But if you're asking me, like, I could easily see him being in the conversation by the end of the year. Like, do I like him or Luke Misa or Teddy Stiga? I still lean those other two guys just because of the skating and the pace in their game. But Hage is not far behind those guys at all. So I would say somewhere in the middle first round, but I think mid to late first round is probably where he's going to end up right now, at least. How far could Adam Gier... Oh, is he eligible for the World Under-18s? Yes, he is. So we'll see if Hockey Canada chooses to take him because he doesn't play in a Hockey Canada league, which who knows what they're going to do with him. But I feel like he should be on the Under-18 team, and I think he could play really well there and jump up draft boards. But for me, a mid-first round makes sense for me. And how far could Adam Jiricek realistically fall on draft day? Well, actually, it's funny you say that. I watched 2 Adam Jiricek games this past week just because I haven't seen him in months. One of them was the World Juniors. Man, it's such a shame. He was playing so well at the World Juniors for that team. Like, you could see him being him. And I love Adam Jiricek. I think he's a really potentially great player. For me, he has a level of comfort and mobility that you don't get out of a lot of defensemen in this year's draft. But could he slip? Absolutely. He blew out his knee. It wasn't super pretty. I imagine teams are going to do their homework on this. Some teams, you hear in the media, they tell the media for some reason how little due diligence they do at the draft, but who am I to judge? But if it were me, I would be calling that team and asking if I could send someone to see him and, give him an examination or something and like check it out and get expert opinions on his injuries and whatever, because I love the guy. I think he could be a really good player. He had a rough go in the Czech Pro League this year. Certainly a rough go, but I'm not taking too much away from him because you could still see the signs of something there. And he's a long-term project anyway, but the tools are so good. So where could he fall? I could see him falling to I don't know. It just depends. How scared is a team of the injury, right? Like, generally, if he's considered a top 10 guy, generally guys that are considered in that range that are injured don't fall a tremendous amount, like out of the first round. But like Peyton Krebs fell to the late teens, I believe, and he was considered a top 10 guy when he was drafted, and he broke his leg. So that's a relatively minor
injury in terms of recovery for a hockey player. It's a broken bone. You'll figure it out. But a knee ligament problem is not, I mean, these days it's not that far behind. Knee ligaments are replaced in a way that it's very good for the body, and generally things recover pretty much fully with good rehab and everything. So I'm not super worried about it. To me, he's a top 10 guy, but if you can get him in the mid first round, you're laughing, I think. Murat Husnudinov is going to be on the power play tonight, supposedly. Okay, good for him. Great. Any thoughts on Ilya Protas and where he might get taken in the draft and how he projects? So Ilya Protas is on my ranking. I've had him there for a while, and he's been scoring in like hotcakes down the stretch. I mean, I like him. I don't think his NHL upside is super high. He's on my watch list. He's a big guy who goes to the net. He's got some power behind his stride. A good amount of puck protection at good pace as well. So I've really liked him. I wouldn't say I'd like jump to the podium to draft him, but someone probably will because he's big, had a good, strong back half of the year. And I definitely think there are USHL guys that are worse that will probably go ahead of him. And I feel like at the end of the season, he could probably be higher on my list. I haven't tracked him, but I want to. But I like him. He's a good player. He's a good player. Thoughts on Herman Truffin is guaranteed to be a middle six NHLer. I mean, I don't think that's a crazy statement. I think he could be a good third line scoring forward in the NHL. Sure, I could see that. But yeah, I think with Truff, I don't know. You and I talk about him all the time, David. So you can answer that. What are the chances Ivan Demidov goes top 3? Not your rankings, more likelihood a GM selects him there. Probably not super high, because I think most general managers are going to look at it and go, yeah, but Anton Salayev played in the KHL. Artyom Levshinov played in the NCAA. Demidov played junior hockey in Russia. That's a tough sell. He's not going to be at the under 18s. He wouldn't even be if they were able to be there. So I'm thinking it's a lower likelihood than people think that he goes that high. I think teams will also look at Konsta Helenius and go, he's a center and scoring points in a pro league in Finland. And, you know, we all love Finland and how hardworking and hard-nosed and whatever you want to say, NHL speak for guys like Finnish players. I just get the feeling it's going to push him down. Are NHL teams really going to say no to Caden Lindstrom, a big center who can skate and shoot and a bit of playmaking as well? Are they really going to say no to I don't know. I can't imagine a Michael Brensing Newgard goes ahead of him. It'll be interesting. I feel like he might be a guy that goes in the 5 to 10 range. Maybe not top 5 or top 3, but I feel like 5 to 10. But I mean, if you get him in that range, then I feel like you're having a great day. What do you think of Quentin Musty? Is he moving up or down in your mind? I mean, Musty is kind of doing what I've always saw in him. I think he was ranked 12th on my board last year. I mean, he's taking the logical next step forward. He had a phenomenal back half last year, and he's just continued it through this year. So good for him. What's the potential of Yakimchuk? He has the size, offensive skill. His defensive play isn't great, but not awful from the games I've watched. So what's his upside? He's just not the type of defender that I'm really looking for. Again, I really have a problem. And again, this is something that could probably burn me down the road, but I have a problem with defensemen where their best assets are once the puck is in the offensive zone. I don't like, if that's what you're looking for in a defenseman, then that's not a defenseman, right? Like that doesn't pass the logic test to me. And when I look at Yakimchuk, I see the defensive problems. And where are those defensive problems stemming from? I don't think he's a particularly gifted skater, especially with his mobility. You can watch him skate pucks up the ice once in a while, and he looks pretty good doing it, but that's not playing defense. His rush defense isn't great. He's not a super involved defensive player really, like, at all. He gets physical, but loses a lot of battles. And again, like, he is one of the leaders in my board so far for icing the puck. Like, just a guy who is just yeeting the puck out of his own end. Is that Calgary sort of telling him that's how they want it? Maybe. But even outside of that, I still see a guy who doesn't skate super well, doesn't really cover defensively super well, and a guy who, when I'm going, oh wow, like the wow moments out of him are once the puck is in the offensive zone, someone hits him, he's standing still and dekes a guy out, cuts inside, makes a play. He's I think he's the highest volume low danger shooter I've tracked this year, so he's peppering the net from the point. He's one of the oldest players in the draft for a first time eligible, and last year was also very productive, but hasn't really taken a huge step that in that sense. And I feel like a lot of that is because his offensive game is pretty cut and dry and pretty easy to, to script, right? Play him 25 minutes, shoot the puck. Play him 25 minutes, shoot the puck. And it works. I feel like he'll go, I'll have him ranked, like I have him ranked where I have him ranked. I think he's at 40 right now for me. And it doesn't matter if I have him at 40 or 29 because he's probably going to go 8th overall. And I'll go, okay, like Matt Wood last year. I had him ranked like almost out of the first round. He went in the mid first round. He went, okay, cool, whatever. And he's been not great this year. Same thing with Nate Danielson. Okay, you want Nate Danielson 9th overall? Go nuts. I can't stop you. But there's a lot of other guys that I think I like a lot more, right? And I think Yakimchuk is one of those guys, for sure. Thoughts on Frank Nazar? Do you see him playing right wing or center with the Blackhawks? Do you think he plays in the NHL this year? That's a very good question. I've really, really liked Frank Nazar every single time I've seen him with Michigan this year. Again, like we're talking guys like Marat Huznadinov or Marco Rossi or Liam Ogren. Like Frank Nazar is right up that alley. Maybe a guy who is not going to score 80 points in an NHL season, but you will miss him when he's not on your team, right? Like a guy who is that all areas of the game, high intensity, pretty good skill level, really, really smart player as well. I think off the puck, especially really smart. Could I see him as a center? I would try him there. I mean, you're the Chicago Blackhawks. Who cares, right? Like, give it a go. I'd give it a go. And, if you have but also, I mean, I also keep in mind that I've got like Oliver Moore on the wings. Could he be a center one day? I could see it. It depends on who Chicago adds in the next year or 2 or 3, but I could see it. Does he play in the NHL this year? I think he'll leave Michigan. I get the feeling he's done with college hockey. Maybe not, but I get the feeling. And if he goes to Chicago, sure. I imagine they'll give him a game, burn the first year of his ELC, and I think he'll, he's got enough pace, he's got enough intensity, he's got enough of a mind for the game that I think he could hold his own and see what he's like in the NHL and see how it goes. Is there another player in this draft where you might think he's another Dylan Larkin?
Well, the guy that you just mentioned in Oliver Moore from last year.
Well, yes, Oliver Moore, but that's last year. In this draft, though,
nothing that nothing that I've seen. And usually,
I would.
You probably would have recommended me to go watch a guy who looks like Dylan Larkin.
Yeah, like I'd say, like Berkeley Catton is up that alley a little bit. Holy crap, Berkeley Catton just hit 50 goals. I didn't realize that. That's insane. Every time I watch Berkeley Catton, I come away going, "How the heck does this guy have X number of goals this year?" Because he doesn't really score in a lot of the games I've seen, outside of like rebounds and stuff. But for him to have 50 goals is pretty incredible. But yeah, it's tricky because Larkin also isn't like super small. So there's not a ton of them. Maybe John Mustard, just because of how up and down he is, like just a remarkably good up and down hockey player. But Dylan Larkin is a much better puck handler and a much better like IQ guy, like sees the ice a lot better and sort of quarterbacks a line a lot better. And Mustard's not playing the wing this year, or he's not playing center this year, but last year he did. I don't think there really is one. Linus Eriksson comes to mind, like a Swedish kid who is tall, lanky, but really good on his feet, really good skater, super, super smart, not super goal scoring guy, but a good sort of guy that stitches a line together. But yeah, I mean, I would have said Oliver Moore last year, and this year I don't really have the same answer with that. Thoughts on Corey Pronman's new rankings? Well, look, I don't know how I feel because Corey Pronman, like, it's so strange to me. Like, so it's March, and he only feels that he needs to rank, I believe, 34 players at this point in the season. And last time he did a ranking list, he had 36 in there. So he's taken guys off and not added them. Like he's squashed things down even more. And I don't know how you come away looking at this year's draft class going, yeah, I only think there's like 34 guys worth writing about. It's like, I don't know. I feel like at the very least, you're looking at 45 at the very least. And that's like, I mean, you're the prospect guy at The Athletic, and you've been here doing this for 5 months, and there's 34 guys you have profiles on. I question that a little bit. But again, like Pronman is a guy who I know also has a lot of ties in the industry and echoes a lot of their sentiments. I think he also, like Craig Button, I think he values the things that he sees with his own eyeballs in person a lot. I think that's why he has Kari Yakimchuk so freaking high, because he was probably at the top prospects game or seen him a couple of times out west and gone, look at that skill level, right? Like, look at the daringness, the confidence, blah, blah, blah. Like, teams probably will want that, which probably not false. But again, the prioritization of what you're looking for seems a little bit off to me. Cole Eiserman at 13 is an interesting take from him, because he's a guy who I think probably deserves more to be in that range. Do I think he'll be a guy who scores a bunch of goals in the NHL and has a bunch of points? Sure. But the finesse and the fine points around it that really make you a serious NHL player, I don't think he quite has yet, at least. But he could. Can't say it's impossible. But I don't know. Other than that, I don't really have any major thoughts. Not ranking even an Emil Hemming, and I mean, I could see why you wouldn't rank Andrew Basha, but ranking a guy like Henry Muse, who I just have not been a fan of this year, Charlie Ellick at 22, Adam Dzeko at 33. Like, it's a lot of it is like, I feel like an NHL head scout for a mediocre team is putting this together and prioritizing stuff that for me, I don't really prioritize, but they're the NHL scout and I'm not. So here we are. Survivor thoughts. Oh my God. Okay. So this season is unhinged. I don't want to talk about Survivor forever, but this season is completely unhinged and crazy and insane. I'm not going to spoil any of it, but if you're a Survivor fan at all, this season is worth watching, because if you like villainy and just, again, I feel like season after season recently, it's just been like a bunch of people with just very mystifying gameplay. Like, it's almost as if you just like you don't know what show you're on. Like, you're a super fan of the show, and then you get on the show and it's as if you've never seen it before with the things that you're saying and who you're saying them to.
I think I know what you're talking
about.
It's
weird. There's a lot of it. There's a lot of it this year, and you're like, what are you talking about? Right? Like, it's bizarre. Anyway, I might volunteer at the Memorial Cup. What teams would you like to see make it? That's a very good question. I do want to see the rankings of who the best teams are in the CHL top 10. I'd like to see Saginaw or London come out of the OHL. In the dub, Portland, I think, is the team that I'd really like to see. Moose Jaw as well would be another one. In Quebec, I honestly haven't seen a tremendous amount of Quebec, but Baie-Comeau seems like the team that's there to sort of be beaten. And that's the only team I can really sort of point to right away. So yeah, something like that. What's your opinion about Matvei Shuravin? Production for the MHL is still very important for you. I don't know. I like Shuravin, but he's kind of like a project. I don't know what he's going to be. Every time I watch him, I'm going, what am I seeing here? And then once in a while you go, oh, that was fun. He'll be, oh, right, Saginaw's hosting, right? So they'll be there. So remove Saginaw. We'll say London and just move on, because they're actually a lot of fun to watch in a way, with some good players, fun to watch. But yeah, Shuravin, he's a mobile guy, has a bit of skill, but as a very, very passive player, sits back a lot in a good way. Like, he's very defense first. He'll get drafted before I'm ready to pick him, I think. Is where I feel about him. How's Grudinin been? Is he still a smooth skating defenseman? Yes, he is. He's still a very mobile boy. Still needs to work on generating speed and like explosiveness. Like that's the big weakness for him, and it always has been the explosiveness. is difficult with him. The changes in direction, the footwork is amazing, and he pushes out of that footwork really, really well and closes gaps really well. But the explosiveness is kind of weak to sort of create space and that separation speed with the puck on his stick. So he does kind of need to be pass first, and he's not the best pass first guy. But for a guy playing the role that he played in the KHL this year, I thought he had a really good year. I see Yakimchuk and Badinka very similarly. Offensively inclined players with an above average skating projection with good puck skills, but a bit raw in different areas as it stands. Do you agree? So I would say that that's up the right alley. I think Badinka is a better skater in general. Maybe not, like Yakimchuk might have the advantage if he's just carrying the puck in a straight line, but I think Badinka plays better defensively with his feet. And he's doing it at a much higher level than Yakimchuk is. And Badinka is playing a lot of minutes, and he doesn't look like he doesn't belong playing those minutes. And I don't think Yakimchuk would have nearly as much success as Badinka does, regardless of how many points Badinka has. I've just really enjoyed how smart and mobile he is. He's a crisp, hard passer as well, which Yakimchuk just has not really been. But Badinka does not have the skill level, I don't think, really, at all. If anything, that's his big weakness. So that's kind of where he's raw. The Dauber boys had an interesting debate about how the 67 system affects prospects like Henry Muse. Do you feel like their system would suppress a player's creativity and offensive potential? I feel like with Henry Muse, even if you set that aside, like, do you really see a high-end skater there, a high-end skill level? Do you see, like, what do you see out of Henry Muse? Because what I see is a really smart player. Like, I see Henry Muse as a smart puck passing defenseman, but that is basically it. And I just don't, and he's also not very big. I feel like with Henry Muse, like, if that's true, if the 67 system hampers creativity and offensive potential, then, and Henry Muse is going to be there the next 2 seasons, it scares me, if anything, right? Like, because if Henry Muse doesn't have creativity in his game, isn't pushing things offensively and putting things on his own stick, he's not a valuable player. So to me, like, when I watch him, I see a guy who has trouble defending because he's not very strong and his footwork isn't great. You know, he's a much more of a Brant Clark-esque guy where it's very much driven off of his passing. And yeah, so I don't know. I don't see that. And with Henry Muse, he's a guy that I don't have ranked because it's like, if I'm drafting him, I'm not super excited, which, you know, sounds bad, but that's just my philosophy speaking, right? Like, I'm not saying he's a bad hockey player. It's just, I think there's too many question marks that there's other guys that have fewer question marks that I'd take a bet on, even if they're going to be lower end guys. If Steve Dangle would start to teach you how to draft, God, okay, would you teach him some nutrition? Ooh, savage, gee whiz. I'm not the best resource for nutrition, trust me. If you knew what I put in my body on a weekly basis, you would not think I would be good at teaching someone nutrition. So Kate Weber thoughts. Cade Weber is a big, hulking dude who skates okay and is there. I don't think he's a super high-end NHL guy outside of maybe a number 7 stopper defensively, but I don't see a tremendous amount there. Thoughts on Cosentino's quote-unquote scouting report on Catton, which goes, a little undersized for the position, but there's no glaring weakness in his game. He's a play driver and a dual-threat offensive player, then ranked him 7th. And Cosentino said Salayev reminded him of Nikita Zadorov and ranked Salayev 2nd. Yeah, well, welcome to the world, right? Like, this is how these things kind of work, right? The logical inconsistencies are right in front of your eyes, right? There's this guy who, if he were this much bigger, he would be awesome. This much taller, this much, that's an inch. He's 5'11", but if only he were 6 feet, if only there was a 6 there, he'd be awesome. This other guy is gigantic and plays like this maybe number 4 defense. I don't know, AJ, Nikita Zadorov, number 4 defenseman, number 3, 4 or 5. You can have a number 4 or 5 defenseman who hits you hard. I'd rather have that. It's like,
who also went for what, a 3rd round pick this year, or maybe even less?
I think it was a 3rd and a 5th, or was it a 4th and a 5th, or something like that?
But yeah,
it doesn't matter. Not much. But
sure,
yeah.
It's a rental, but still, it's like,
yeah,
you're not, even if it if he was a higher impact player, he'd be going for still much higher in terms of like you'd get it. He'd command a first.
And have you heard anyone talk about how amazing he's been with Vancouver? Like he's been Nikita Zadorov with Vancouver. He's just been a physical defense first guy. Like, but last I checked, he had like 2 points, if I'm not mistaken.
I think he might have gotten a point last night. I think he might have even scored, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, so he has 10 points in 40 games with the Canucks. So sure, right?
Yeah, like he's ideally a bottom pair defenseman that you throw over the boards to throw people into the boards and also just be reliable. And that's what he does.
Yeah.
He's humongous. All right. Or humongous.
Humongous. Big.
Yeah. And he's fine. Right.
Yeah.
And if you're saying, oh, this guy's a center in Berkeley Catton, he's just a bit undersized, but no glaring weaknesses. Like to me, that sounds like a pretty good bet to make.
Before we end the show, there's a couple more questions that I'm going to race through, but I did, if you're following on Instagram, you can follow us on Instagram at Scouching_Will. I post, every show day, I post a question box. I've gotten a few questions from the same person that I've been banking over the last few weeks, and I won't have time to answer them today. So I put them in the notes for next week. So I apologize if you're listening and I can't get to them. But there will be a section of catching up on Instagram questions. So if you have questions for the show, either DM me on Twitter or wait until show day and you can go on Instagram and the story will allow you to ask questions. Any better thoughts on Justin Poirier from the Quebec League? You know what? The last game I saw of him, he was better. But I don't think I see, I still struggle to see an NHL player there. Like, just a guy who will skate he'll move his feet a ton and skate as hard as he can in a straight line and shoot the puck. He's got a bit of speed to him as well, but the bar for a guy like Poirier is so high, and I just don't know. Really good AHL scorer, I could see, sure. But NHL teams are not going to let him play the way that he plays in Quebec, for sure. Matthew Soto thoughts. I always admire Matthew Soto. I don't think I'd draft him. He's a high intensity guy. He goes. He's got some skill. I probably would invite him to camp. I don't think I would draft him though on a re-entry. How do you think between Gauthier, McTavish, and Lindstrom, who will pick better as potential physical goal scoring center? Would be fun and stupid at the same time for the Ducks to draft Lindstrom. I mean, Lindstrom is right up their alley of what they kind of seem to want. I mean, I assume that one of those guys would go to the wing. One of them, I don't know. I don't really care who. But I mean, the better physical goal scoring center would probably be Lindstrom, but McTavish is right there with him. I don't really see that out of Gauthier. I know Gauthier is tall, but I don't think he's a power forward, really. I mean, he's a shooter. He's a shooter, not necessarily a physical first shooter guy, but he is a big dude who can protect the puck pretty well. That's going to be it for today. We're running a little bit past time, but thank you very much for joining us. Thank you again for all the questions. And thank you, Mr. Jadaro, for producing yet another wonderful episode of the show.
Job.
Job. And again, before we go, we'll read the ads out so you can follow or you can help us out by using our Fanatics link, which is available below in the description, or you can scan the QR code in the chat window, which gives us a small kickback on anything you buy in the store. Puck Preps Hockey also helps the show out, where you can get all your NCAA and CHL prospect needs. And also Fractal Hockey Consulting, my business for hand-tracked targeted player analysis and recruitment packages for the NCAA, Europe, and beyond. And of course, Scouching.ca, where you can get exclusive access to innovative data tools with tons of insights into draft prospects and players making their way into the NHL. So with that, we're done for another installment. We will see you on Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with our good friend Samuel McGilligan.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. As far as I know, he's involved, so we'll see. But yes, thank you for joining us, and have a lovely weekend. It's lovely weather out here down in southern Ontario, so be sure to enjoy it. At least it's nice-ish. It's cloudy, but it's nice. But anyway, have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you on Monday night.
Go Leafs, go.